everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today I'm going to talk about the loops. Until now, I talked about switch statement, if else, data types, right? So those ones are very important, but what I'm going to talk about today plays a very important role in your Apex programming activities, right? Because the loops are very essential. A lot of things require looping when you work with Apex, or as a matter of fact with any other programming language. So there are different loops, right, in Apex. First one is the DoWhile, then while loop, then for loops. For loops comes in two variants. We're not going to talk about for loops today. We're going to talk about DoWhile and while loop, right? The first thing first, you need to log into your org, right? So I've logged into my org. So let's jump into developer console. Okay, so the way to go to developer console, I'm pretty sure everyone knows by now. Go to this gearcog icon at the top right hand corner and go to developer console. So we're gonna go to this, so don't worry about this one. We're gonna go to debug. Okay, we're gonna go to execute anonymous window. So this is the last demonstration content. So you're gonna get rid of it. So why loops are important, right? As I said, because you might need to perform an operation in a loop. So in that case, the loops are important. Let me give you a very context. In Apex, you might have to, you might use a SOQL query. So if you have used SOQL query, it's like it's a way to get the data from Salesforce objects, right? So we use SOQL query. So you can use SOQL query in Apex, and you can actually loop the data of a SOQL data set to do whatever you want to do. For instance, let's say I wanted to modify an account active status, right? For, let's say, for all the accounts that's been created today. Okay. So the way to do that, you get the account information using a SOQL. If you wanted to do using Apex, you get it in a SOQL in a list or a collection, and then you loop through that list, right, to modify it. That's one of the ways you can do it, right? So that's one of the use of the loops. There are a different scenario where the loops are used, but just want to talk about a very simple one today. So do while and while. So let's start with the while loop first, right? So while loops, right? So while loop, why do we need a while loop, right? It does based on a condition, right? Let me give you a very, very, very generic example, right? Very basic, like a high school level example, right? So let's say I wanted to print a number, right? I wanted to print from 0 to 5, okay? So you can use that using a loop, okay? How to do that? It's pretty straightforward, okay? So we're gonna use while loop here, okay? So you're gonna say integer, right? That's how the data type we define, and you define I, okay? And then you can always start with 0 if you're not sure, but if you know the default value, then you can start with that, right? Because you have to start with a value. That's how the loop starts. You cannot have a null value when you deal with a loops, right? Because then it will not work, okay? So I'll show you what I meant by that, okay, in a second. So you have to put a initial value to start with, a starting point, right? It could be whatever value based on your requirements. Sometimes, let's say you wanted to start from 5, you start with 5. You wanted to start with 10, you start with 10, right? It all depends upon exactly what you're trying to achieve. For in this scenario, I wanted to print a number from 0 to 5, okay? So that's how I wanted to do. So how to do that is pretty straightforward, okay? So you do a while loop here, okay? This is syntax, while, okay? And then here you're gonna write a Boolean expression. A Boolean expression means true and false expression, right? That's how the Boolean is. If you have watched my data, Boolean data type series, you will know what I'm talking about, right? If you haven't, I would highly encourage you to check that out. The data types. I'll put the link in the I button, right? So you can check it out. Right, so here we have to have a Boolean expression, okay? So here I want, like I said, the requirement is to print 0 to 5, okay? So I will print anything which this number is less than equals to 5, okay? So so what happens is that I will just let me type the statement here, then explain what I'm doing, okay? So it will become easy. All right, so look at the statement for a second, okay? Look at it and then think about it, what I'm trying to do, okay? You can pause the video and think for yourself for a second what I'm trying to achieve here, okay? So the requirement is to print from 0 to 5, right? So that's exactly what I'm doing in a loop, okay? So what happens is here, right? So I have initialized the value of I, which is of integer data type, right, to 0, okay? Since we have to start with 0, right? And now I created a loop. So this is the Boolean expression here, where I is less than equal to 5, okay? So the first, when the code runs, okay? So it runs in a loop, right? It runs, keep on running in a loop, right? So when the code comes here, it checks, okay, the value of I equals to 0. Is 0 less than equals to 5, right? It's true. So it prints 0 here. And then what I'm doing here, I'm incrementing the value of I, or you can also type I equals to I plus 1. You can very well do this, or you can very well do I plus plus. It means the same, okay? So if you don't understand I plus plus, you think it's a bit complicated, let me keep it very simple, okay? So I equals to I plus 1, okay? So the reason why we have to do that here, okay? Remember this, if you don't put this condition, okay? So what happens is, so the code will finish here and goes back to the loop again to say I is less than equal to 5. So in this case, what happens? Value of I equals to 0, right? It prints 0. Now it goes to a loop again. Again, it checks I is less than equal to 5. 0 is less than equal to 5. So it keeps on going in the loop. So because the value of I will always be 0. So it will end up in an infinite loop. So it will crash the code, right? So that's not a good practice. So that's why I'm putting it here. I equals to I plus 1. So it increased the value of I. So in this case, it will be 1. Okay. So it comes and checks here. The value of I is less than equal to 5. Okay. So 1 is less than equal to 5. That's correct. So it comes here and then it's increased the value of I again. So it goes here, right? And then it reaches to a point where the value of I will become 6, right? And it comes to the loop here. Is the value of I is less than equal to 5? Is the value of 6 is less than equal to 5? Absolutely not. So it breaks the loop. So the code ends, right? That's how the loop works. So as long as this expression, this expression is true, the loop will keep on running, right? So it will only exit the loop if this condition becomes false, right? So pay attention to it. So you have to be very careful when you write a loop, right? Because when you start out for the first time, I understand that it gets confusing, right? When I started programming a long time ago in a C programming, right, I used to get confused, right? But it took me some time to figure out. But it's a very simple concept, right? That's why I wanted to explain to you the way the program works, right? So we can do with other example if you're interested, right? So we're going to do, so we don't normally use while statement with strings because it doesn't make sense, right? So let me run this, okay? And, right, hang on a second. Why, okay, sorry, this is, need to put a call. Okay, so, you're going to see, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is exactly what we wanted, right? Now, let me do something else, okay? Let me say I is greater than equal to 5. Now tell me, will it run the loop or no? You can pause the video and tell me what it will print, right? Think about it, pause the video for a second, and then work out for yourself, okay? But as I explained to you, that so while loop only works if the Boolean condition, right, that comes true, right? So in this case, I equals to 0, okay? And 0 is greater than 5? No, right? So it will not run this loop at all, okay? Let's try this. Right. Absolutely none. Okay. Now, what will happen, right? Think about a scenario, right, where you wanted to print 0, okay, and you still wanted to check the condition I is greater than 5. It's just a stupid scenario, but just for the sake of argument, just let's say that you wanted to print just a 0, okay, and you wanted to still run this condition I is greater than or equals to 5. Is that possible using this while loop? I mean, you can do this, you know. You can do this. But it's not really good, right? Because, you know, you might have some other scenario, you know, which you wanted to print, so you're going to do all the system.debug or whatever. It's not a good solution whatsoever, right? I mean, let me tell you, you know, straight away, it's just a rubbish solution. So we can't really do this, okay? So in that case, we have something called DoWhile, right? So in DoWhile, right, do something while the code executes, okay? So in DoWhile, you are guaranteed to get at least one value in return, right? Irrespective of the while condition. Okay, explain to you if that sounds crazy. Let me comment this code out, okay? It's interesting. The loops are pretty straightforward. I mean, I know that if you're starting programming for the first time, especially Salesforce admins who never programmed before, some of you might have, but those who haven't. So, you know, I understand that it can get a bit clunky at times because loops can put people off, but stay with me. I'm trying to explain as simple as I can. But by all means, if you have questions, you are requested to put your questions in the comment section below, okay? Right, now, do while, okay? Just see the magic here. So the syntax with the do while is something like this, okay? I'll explain you what I'm doing. Let me finish, okay? So while, as you know, everyone, right, the condition. Okay. This is a very stupid example, but I will show you how it works, okay? Now, remember, let me put the semicolon here. Remember what I said before? I wanted to print 0, right? And I still wanted to keep the condition here, okay? Now, tell me whether it will print or not. Okay, so, as usual, I declared a variable of data type integer, okay? I initialize the value to 0, okay? Pretty straightforward, nothing fancy here. And the do while, the way it works, right? So it will print once, right? It will run the do statement irrespective of the while statement here. It will run once for sure, okay? Right? So what happens is, right? In this case, it will print 0. Let me show you. Oh, sorry, that's... Okay, the reason why I print 0 here, as I explained to you, that it will run the do statement once, no matter if this while statement is true or false, okay? It will run one for sure, okay? Now, let's say if I wanted to print 0 to 5, we can still do that. The way to do that, okay? I is less than equals to 5. I plus plus. Okay, let me run this and I'll explain to you in a minute. Okay. Right, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? This is exactly what we wanted. Okay. Now, so the way it works, okay, is similar like in this scenario, it's pretty much works same like while loop. Okay, it's the only difference, as I mentioned, that the system.debug, this code will run once, irrespective of this condition will be fulfilled or not. Okay, so let's look at the code. Okay, so we are initializing the value of I, okay, to 0 of data type integer. Okay, and then code will come here and it will run the statement first. Okay, So the code will come to the line number 11, right? Then it jumps to 12, then it jumps to 13, right? And it will print it. In this case, it will print 0, okay? And then it will increment the value of I by 1, which is equal to 1 plus, which is exactly the same here. It means the same, okay? So it will become 1, okay? And then it will jump to the loop, okay? And we'll see whether the value of I is less than equals to 5, which is 1 is less than equal to 5. Absolutely correct. So it goes back to the statement again. That's the line number 13, okay? Now it will print 1, okay? And then it will increment the value of 1 with 1. That means it will become 2, right? And then we'll come to the while statement again and say, is the value of 2 is less than equal to 5? That's correct. So it jumps back to the line number 13 again. And then it will print 2, right? And then it will, now the value of I is 2, okay? So it will increment the value of I with 1. So that will become 3, okay? So now it comes to the while statement again. So the value of I is less than equals to 5. That's 3 is less than equals to 5? Yeah. So it keeps on repeating till the value of I will become 6. And the value of I becomes 6, okay? It will say is 6 is less than equals to 5, which is not correct. So it breaks out the loop and the code ends, okay? That's how it works, right? Now you see how simple it is, right? So, I mean, we're gonna do more complex stuff with the while loop and as we go forward, because my plan is to, once I finish with Apex, to do a simple project on Salesforce, you know, probably an order management or something where we can use the code and we can use the integration as well, right, to integrate stuff. Because I wanted to train you guys to be a good, awesome Salesforce developer as well as an admin. Because the thing is that you have to be an admin first before you become a developer. You can't be a developer without knowing the admin stuff, I'm afraid. That's the reality, because if you do not understand the admin stuff, then you will be eager to jump on writing the code, which is not necessary at first place, right? Because it's like saying, okay, let me create a custom object using a code. That's really not great, right? Because what would you do that when you can do using point and click, okay? Right, so that's exactly what I wanted to cover today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm trying to explain as much as I can, right? And the next video we talk about the for loops and the for loops using collections, right? That's where the things get magical, right? Collections plays a very important role in Apex, right? So stay tuned and I hope you have an amazing day. Take care.